Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Genesis chapter 7 in a clear and simple way, step by step. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this explainer today because we are looking at one of the most famous, pivotal, and literally earth-shattering events in all of human history as recorded in the biblical text, the Great Flood. Now, our approach today is going to be incredibly focused. We're going to take a clear-cut, strict chronological walkthrough of the text. We aren't going to skip a single verse, and we are going to look purely at the pashhat. That's the simple, direct, literal meaning of the words right there on the page. No deep symbolic rabbit holes today, just the facts. We really want to deeply explain the who, what, where, and why of this chapter so that you walk away with a comprehensive, rock-solid understanding of exactly what occurred. I'll be speaking carefully, taking my time to unpack each and every verse. So get comfortable, focus on the screen, and let's explore this profound text together. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, a quick context check and our step-by-step walkthrough. Second, some textual clarifications. Third, key ideas and practical lessons. And finally, a quick chapter recap. Let's get going. Section 1, Context and Walkthrough. We're stepping into the text at the precise, unbelievably tense moment just before the cataclysm actually begins.
Before we even read verse 1 of chapter 7, we really have to remember where we are in the story. In the prior chapter, we learned that mankind's wickedness had become so great and the earth was so thoroughly filled with corruption and violence that God declared an end to all flesh. It was a complete and total moral collapse of the world. But right in the midst of all that heavy darkness, the text tells us that one man, Noah, found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Because of this, Noah was given precise blueprints to build an absolutely enormous ark. And now, well, the ark is finished. Noah is 600 years old. His family stands as the sole recipients of God's grace, and the flood is rapidly approaching. The stage is completely, irreversibly set.
This brings us right to the first 3 verses of Genesis 7. God speaks directly to Noah and tells him, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation." Notice the why here. It's specifically because of Noah's righteousness. Then, God gives some very exact instructions regarding the animals. Noah is told to take 7 pairs, that's a male and its mate, of every kind of clean animal, but only 1 pair, 2 of every kind, of unclean animals. He is also to take 7 pairs of every kind of bird. Now you might be wondering, why this clear-cut distinction? The text gives us the why right in verse 3. To keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. The seed of life literally needs to be preserved. We will clarify these clean and unclean categories a bit later in the explainer, but for now, just look at the precision. God is ensuring that enough animals survive to repopulate the earth and fulfill future needs. Moving right along to verse 4, we hit a massive chronological marker. God says, 7 days from now, I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. I want you to stop and just think about the immense weight of that statement. God is giving a final, absolute 7-day warning, a literal 1-week countdown to the end of the world as they knew it. The instruction is perfectly clear on the what? Rain for 40 days and 40 nights, and the result is also unmistakably clear, the complete blotting out of every living substance from the face of the earth. The decades of building are over, the time for final preparation has officially arrived. Verses 5 through 7 anchor the narrative firmly in history, reminding us that Noah was exactly 600 years old when the floodwaters actually came upon the earth. Verse 5 simply but powerfully states, "And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him." You know, this is a defining characteristic of Noah throughout the text. He doesn't argue. He doesn't try to negotiate or delay. His obedience is entirely unwavering. In verse 7, we see the immediate action. Noah, his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. The family completely retreats into the safety of the vessel, executing the plan exactly as instructed. Next, verses 8 through 10 map out an incredible, orderly procession. We read that pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds, and of all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark. Now notice the phrasing there. It says they came to Noah. He didn't have to go out and hunt them down with a net. They were divinely guided right to him. They entered 2 by 2 exactly as God commanded. And then comes verse 10, and after the 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth. Just imagine those 7 days for a second. The loading is done, the family is inside, the animals are inside, and then they just wait. It must have been a tense, incredibly quiet 7-day wait inside that massive wooden structure before a single drop of rain ever fell. Verse 11 breaks down a highly specific historical date for us.
The biblical text desperately wants you to know this is a real, literal event that happened on a real day. It reads, in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month. Right there, we, the audience, are given a clear sense of historical scale. But what exactly happens on this precise timeline? Well, the text says, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Guys, this was not just a heavy thunderstorm. Water erupted from beneath the Earth's surface, and the skies opened up simultaneously. The catastrophe began with terrifying, explosive suddenness from both above and below.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer unyielding volume of the cataclysm in verse 12. And rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days, 40 nights. Relentless, continuous, completely uninterrupted downpour. The text really wants us to understand that this is a total, overwhelming event. It is not localized. It isn't a flash flood where you could simply run up a nearby hill to escape. The pure volume of water falling upon the earth for over a month straight would rapidly and violently alter the entire landscape of the planet. Verses 13 through 15 meticulously review the boarding process, almost serving as a final summary of who and what made it safely inside. On that selfsame day, the very day the disaster strikes, the text strictly categorizes the passenger list. We have Noah, his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons. That is exactly 8 human beings in total. Along with them, every wild animal, all livestock, every crawling creature, and every bird according to its kind. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them entered the ark with Noah. The text takes the time to emphasize this complete, thorough categorization, so we understand that God's preservation inside the ark was just as exhaustive as his destruction outside of it. Now we arrive at verse 16. The animals have gone in, male and female of every living thing, exactly as God commanded. And then we read a deeply profound, simple sentence, then the Lord shut him in. So the crucial point is this: Noah did not close the door himself. God closed the door. This definitive action by God marks the absolute finality of preparation. Once that massive door was shut by the Creator, there was absolutely no going back. The time for grace had ended for the outside world, and the onset of destruction had officially begun. The remnant inside was perfectly sealed and secured by God himself. Verses 17 through 20 anchor the rising flood with specific, clear-cut data. For 40 days, the flood kept coming. The waters increased. And what happened? They lifted the massive ark high above the earth. The text repeats that the waters rose and increased greatly, and the ark floated on the surface. Verse 19 says all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. And verse 20 gives us the precise depth of coverage. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet, or 15 cubits in the ancient measurement, above the highest peaks. To put that into perspective, there was literally nowhere left to stand anywhere on the globe. The entire topography of the earth was fully submerged. Now, we must look at verses 21 and 22, and we really shouldn't rush through this part. The text catalogs the stark, devastating aftermath. It lists exactly what perished. Every living thing that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth and all mankind. Verse 22 makes it painfully comprehensive, stating, everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. The text leaves absolutely no room for exception outside the ark. The simple, direct meaning is total and complete destruction of terrestrial life, period. Verse 23 sharpens this point by creating a powerful, undeniable contrast. The text actually repeats itself to ensure the reader understands the sheer magnitude of what just happened. It says every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. Men and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds of the air were wiped from the earth. That is the total destruction outside. But then look at the contrast. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. Total destruction of life outside the ark is sharply contrasted with the total preservation of the remnant inside the ark. Two completely different realities existing at the exact same moment, separated only by the wooden walls of the vessel. Finally, we conclude our chronological verse-by-verse walkthrough with verse 24. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. So after the 40 days of rain stopped, the waters didn't just immediately start to recede. They stayed at their absolute peak, completely flooding the earth for 150 days. Take a moment to just reflect on that stark silence. For 5 solid months, there was nothing but a vast, endless ocean and one single floating vessel, containing the only remaining breath of life on the planet. The sheer magnitude of those 150 days of unyielding floodwaters is a deeply sobering end to chapter 7.
Section 2. Textual clarifications. Let's quickly look at a few ancient phrases from the chapter to ensure we have a complete, literal understanding.
First up, let's demystify that phrasing from verse 11, describing the start of the flood, the springs of the great deep, and the floodgates of heaven. While this sounds very poetic to our modern ears, it is actually a physical, direct description of the cataclysm based on the ancient understanding of the earth. Springs of the great deep refers simply to subterranean reservoirs of water, massive underground water tables bursting violently through the crust of the earth. Floodgates of heaven, or the windows of heaven, simply refers to the sky releasing a torrential, unprecedented volume of rain. The text is plainly telling us that the earth flooded from massive water sources pushing up from below and pouring down from above at the exact same time.
We also need to provide another simple clarification regarding the animal categories mentioned early in the chapter. Why 7 pairs of clean animals and only 1 pair of unclean? Well, in the simple, direct biblical context, these categories indicate an animal's suitability for human consumption and for religious sacrifice. After the flood, Noah will need to offer sacrifices to God to show his gratitude, and eventually humanity will be given permission to eat meat. If Noah only brought 2 clean animals, offering one as a sacrifice would literally mean the extinction of that entire species. Therefore, bringing 7 pairs ensures there are plenty of clean animals for worship and food without threatening their survival on the newly cleansed earth. It's actually a very practical instruction. Section 3. Key ideas and lessons. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing the big picture emerge. Distilling the core concepts found purely in this literal text, we see a really powerful relationship between divine instruction and human obedience. God provides extremely precise instructions, down to the specific day and the exact required number of animals. In response, Noah executes unwavering obedience. He doesn't question, he acts. We also see 2 massive opposing forces at work in this chapter: complete judgment and preserved remnant. The judgment on corruption is total and literal. Everything outside perishes. Yet God's grace is equally complete. The remnant inside the ark is perfectly preserved and fiercely protected. So, what practical life lessons can we extract from this direct text to improve ourselves today? First, we absolutely must learn to listen to instructions carefully. Noah's very survival depended on doing exactly what was commanded, not just what he felt like doing at the time. Second, we must prepare before the storm hits. When the rain actually started falling, it was far too late to start building an ark. Noah spent decades preparing for a drop of rain he had never even seen. And third, trust the process during the wait. Remember those tense 7 days inside the ark before the rain started? Sometimes we do everything right, we follow all the instructions, and then we just have to sit in silence and wait for the situation to unfold, trusting that we are entirely secured. Section 4. Chapter Recap. Let's do a quick, structured review of everything we've read to cement your understanding. Here is the concise, step-by-step summary of the narrative arc we just walked through. We started with God's final 7-day warning and the required count for clean and unclean animals. We then saw the orderly boarding of the ark by Noah's family and the animals, culminating in God himself shutting the door. Exactly on time, we witnessed the eruption of the floodwaters from the deep and the sky for 40 straight days. This resulted in the total coverage of the earth, bearing the highest mountains by over 20 feet. Finally, we surveyed the complete aftermath. Every living thing outside perished, leaving only Noah and his family floating safely for 150 days. The sequence is clear, historical, and deeply impactful. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Just as Noah faced a literal cataclysm, we all face overwhelming storms in our own lives. When the floodwaters of life rise, have you meticulously prepared your ark? Have you listened to the instructions, done the hard work of preparation long before the storm hit, and built a foundation that will keep you and your family safe? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.